Alright, this is Weapon X Reacts and we're back with another video, and this is going to be a review of Breaking Bad, which is known as one of the greatest shows of all time. And I can definitely see why, because it is an absolute masterpiece when it comes to its amazing performances from everyone involved. And it's one of those shows that we just don't get anymore. And I'm going to let you know that there will be spoilers in this review. Walter White is one of the most iconic characters in television history, and Bryan Cranston's performance will go down as the greatest performance of his entire career as an actor. And I just want to let you know that he started off as a comedy actor in a show called Malcolm in the Middle. And Breaking Bad showed that he is really good in dramatic roles. And Walter White's character development was just something else. Like how we first see him living the mundane life as a chemistry teacher, and he also works part-time at a car wash, all for his family. And it's like he is trapped in a cage that he can't escape from, until all that changes when he gets diagnosed with cancer, which ends up being a wake-up call for him to do everything he can to provide for his family by making and selling meth. Also, I want to talk about his past life for a bit, like how he worked at Grey Matter Technologies with Gretchen, and Walter White explains the reason why he left is because he felt like he was inferior to her. And he even says that he is part of the empire business, not the meth business. This right here is a great example of the fact that he is a man who was very intelligent, but with a personality that's very prideful. As he gets deeper into the drug business, we see him go from a scared person to becoming more confident in himself, and ruthless too. And one of the best things about the show is that it does a good job of making you think if his actions are for the good of his family or for himself. And you see him do many things in this show that he wouldn't have done in the beginning of when he started his journey. Like lying to and manipulating people all to get what he wants, and it takes away from the kind and caring man he used to be. And it gets to the point where his motivation to provide for his family doesn't matter anymore. And where the only thing that does matter is wanting power and respect. As we get into season 4 and 5, we see him as not Walter White anymore, but Heisenberg, who was basically a darker version of himself, all because of his pride and ego, which all led to his downfall. And the Say My Name scene is one of the most iconic scenes in the show, and it's a great example of how far down he's forced himself into. And I think he is a perfect example of a man who had ambition and drive to make his life better, but it all came at a cost of losing his sense of what's right and wrong. This just shows you that Walter White is a character that's compelling, and his story is also kind of a cautionary tale in a way. A failed American dream. Jesse Pinkman is probably the most tragic character in the show, and we first see him as a loser and a junkie who lives his life as a meth cook. And I am just gonna let you know that he was also a former student of Walter White, but really, he is a man that went through a lot of hell in his life, and One of the things I like about this is that his struggles doesn't feel like forced melodramatic nonsense, but it was portrayed in a way that was realistic and compelling. All thanks to Aaron Paul's fantastic performance as him. Originally, Vince Gilligan wanted this character to be killed off by Tuco Salamanca in season 1. But he decided to keep this character in the show for a bit longer, all due to the fact of how well written he was. And it was all worth it in the end, as it brought a lot of heart and depth to his character and the show as a whole. Jesse goes through many hardships throughout the show. Things like addiction, loss, and grief, and regret. And he feels sorry for the things he did. And he tries to make up for it later on. And while I thought El Camino had many flaws, it was a satisfying conclusion for this character as he drives in his car to finally find peace in his life, away from the drug world. Overall, this is a character that has to be one of the most interesting and sympathetic characters ever put in a show, and Aaron Paul makes his journey one that is worthwhile. Also, one thing I have to mention is that the chemistry between him and Walter White was done so well. The writing is one of the main reasons of why the show is so good. Like, every single character has depth to them, and the journey that Walter White goes on to until he turns from a chemistry teacher into a drug lord who will do anything to get what he wants is so fucking well done. And it shows you that the people that wrote this show actually cared about writing a story that mattered, instead of the ones we get today that just like to preach about their problems of the world to us. And guess what? Nobody gives a damn about your politics, okay? Overall, the writing is what makes this show a masterpiece that I totally recommend you watch. And one of the best things about the show is how it does tension. And this show also shows you the consequences of using drugs too. Like, for example, the family who are meth heads, and the emotional scene where Jane gets overdosed and dies. The cinematography is absolutely fantastic, and it uses a lot of handheld camera work that adds a sense of urgency and realism to the show. And not just that, it even mirrors the emotional states of the characters. Also, the wide-angle shots that this show uses works perfectly, and it makes the environment the characters live in feel much bigger than they are. And one of the reasons of why I like the cinematography is all because of the time-lapse shots that this show uses. And it is just stunning to look at, and it makes it extremely immersive in a way. But the use of lighting and color was just something else when it comes to the visuals that this show has. The cinematography is one of the main highlights of the show, and it's not just put there to make it look good, but it enhances the storyline, and it's pretty damn great when you think about it. Gus Fring is probably one of the most iconic villains in television history, if not one of the greatest villains of all time. And Giancarlo Esposito gave a terrifying performance as him. And I think that it is one of his best roles he ever done. And when you first see him in season 2, he is described to be just some guy that owns a restaurant, but when you get deeper, you realize that he is a drug dealer that uses his restaurant as a front to sell cocaine, and for purposes that are much more evil. One of the scariest things about this character is that in some scenes he speaks in a calm tone, which really adds a lot to who he is. And the scene of where he manipulates Walter White into joining him is very interesting, as it's basically him trying to bring back his ego by telling him these 3 words: a man provides. And on the surface, it can be interpreted as a motivational speech to some people, but really, it's much more than that, as it's basically him comparing the life he had to Walter's. Well, we don't have any evidence if he had a wife and a child. The 2 most interesting things about his character is how he dresses, and his past of when he was in poverty with his family as a child in Chile. And there was even political problems that happened there. And one moment of where Max, who was someone Gus Fring was with, got shot in the head by Hector Salamanca when they were in Mexico. And the scene of where he gets his revenge is very intense. And it's another example of how dangerous he is. Also, the scene of where he dies is one of the most iconic scenes in television history. So it starts off with him walking out of his car all the way to the hospital. And the music and acting from Giancarlo Esposito here is really good. And then he sees Hector Salamanca, and then he realizes that there was a bomb. And then it explodes, and it finishes off with Gus Fring walking out with half of his face blown off. If I can sum up this character, is that he is a literal embodiment of the dark side of corporations. Like how you see on the adverts, he is always smiling while promoting his business, all for the sake of PR, but really, it is all to cover up who he really is. And it's just insane to me that companies right now are rejecting DEI policies, which is a good example of that. Our society is healing, and that is the best thing I can say. And he is a man who had potential to live a good life, but wasted it all by being fueled by revenge over the people who wronged him, making his character extremely complex and tragic too. Tuco Salamanca is a psychopathic drug kingpin who is known for his aggressive behavior, and every scene with him is intense, as you are not sure what he would do to someone if they tried to question him or piss him off. And I will admit that the actor did a pretty good job playing this character. Hector Salamanca is a terrifying villain, and Mark Margolis absolutely killed it as him. So, Hector Salamanca is a drug lord who lost his voice and got paralyzed due to his meds being swapped with sugar pills to amplify his medical issue as part of a plan orchestrated by his former lieutenant Nacho Varga. And now he is strapped to a wheelchair and using a bell to communicate. But it made him even more threatening as a character, along with his personality. And we first see this in a flashback of when he tries to drown one of his children just because he broke his brother's toy. All as a way to teach him a lesson that family is everything. And after one of the brothers punch Hector Salamanca then stops trying to drown the child, and then when they look up, the shot of him saying family is everything is just terrifying. And it's just another one of those examples that show you how dangerous he is. And he is the main reason of why Gus Fring wanted revenge in the first place. And Hector Salamanca also tried to get revenge when his nephew Tuco Salamanca got killed by hiring his twins to hunt down the person that did it. Overall, this character is a ruthless individual, and Mark Margolis chews up every scene he is in. Todd Alquist is probably one of the most realistic depictions of a psychopath I have ever seen, and Todd initially appears unassuming, aloof, polite, and eager to please. But when he sees a kid who he thought was trying to rat him out, he then shoots him, while Jesse and Walter watches it all happen. This scene shows you what kind of person he is, as he basically does not give a shit about his own victims that he killed. And the scene of where he kills Jesse's girlfriend is emotionally intense. Overall, this character is completely unsympathetic, and he just kills for the sake of it. But we do see a little bit of humanity in him in El Camino, and sometimes even in the show. And Jesse Plemons did a great job playing him, and this has to be one of his most underrated roles. Hank Schrader is an interesting character, and he is a guy that works for the DEA and is a friend of Walter White. And when he realizes that Walter White got into the drug business, he makes it his goal to find him. And in some scenes, he doesn't even know if he is the hero he wants to be. But he gets through it. And the performance from Dean Norris was just amazing. And the scene with him in the elevator was just powerful, as it shows his humanity and how he feels like he can't take it anymore. And this show shows that perfectly. Saul Goodman is a character that is just iconic, as Bob Odenkirk did a good job with bringing this character to life. And every scene with him is entertaining to watch. And I won't say that he is a villain, but he does do bad things, like being a lawyer that helps out criminals, and in one instance, he tries to poison Brock. And what we know through his personal life is that when he was young, he was introduced to the philosophy that there are sheep and there are wolves. And it gave him the dog eat dog mindset that we see in the show. And Better Call Saul added a little bit more into his character, like how he got into the law business to prove that he can be a better person. But instead of helping him, it increased his ego. Overall, Saul Goodman is one of the most well-written characters in the show, and Bob Odenkirk will be remembered for his performance as him, and I can't wait for the sequel of Nobody that's coming out this year. Ozymandias is, without a doubt, the greatest episode in this show, and it's a depressing one, too. And this is when we see Walter White lose everything. And we first start the episode with a flashback scene of Walter and Jesse starting their first meth cook. And then Walt calls Skylar with an excuse for not being home. And he suggests the name Holly for their baby. In the present, Hank is now wounded following the shootout with Jack's Brotherhood, and Steve Gomez is dead. Jack prepares to kill Hank, but Walter begs Jack to spare him, offering his entire fortune in exchange. And then Hank starts saying his last words to Walter, and then Jack shoots him, with Walter White collapsing on the ground, crying. And this is one of the most emotional scenes in this show. Jack and his gang then discover the money hidden under the barrels. But Jack tells Walter that they will leave one for him, due to the respect Todd had for him. And then Jesse gets taken away, with Walter telling him that he saw Jane die. A couple of scenes later, Walter arrives home, with Skylar White thinking that he killed Hank, and then he starts telling him to get out. But it gets even worse when they try to tackle each other. And then Walter leaves the house while taking Holly away from Skylar. When the police arrive at the house, Walter then calls Skylar, telling her that he killed Hank, and says that she never respected him in the first place. And this scene here is extremely well acted from Bryan Cranston and Anna Gunn. We see Holly being left at a fire station, and then he rides off with Saul Goodman's car. Overall, this whole episode was just powerful, and it's the main reason of why the show is the masterpiece that it is. The soundtrack of the show was just something else, and it really fits the dark tone that this show has, and I will show you an example of it right now. Why can't we get shows like this in modern Hollywood? It's because we just have to get trash. Like, really, I would rather watch this show way more than the stuff that came out from Disney or Netflix. Just to let you know that this music is from the intro of the show, and I really like it. The intro of this show is just so good. Vince Gilligan, he knew what he was doing with this show. Sorry, mate, you're never gonna get shows like this again. There's another show that came out like last year, like The Penguin. That was really good. And it came from a declining franchise. DC and Marvel, they're both fucked. Do I care? Plus, I did see the announcements. I just don't care about any new Marvel stuff anymore. The quality has declined. Disney destroyed Marvel with wokeness. Just how Hollywood destroys every single franchise we see. Imagine having this show being made today. Imagine how boring that would be.
Shopify is a platform that helps entrepreneurs get started down the path they want. Sometimes starting a business can be scary. I feel like I lost.
Sorry, that was an ad. But really, to me, it does not matter. The audiences of today will never appreciate this film. Never. Because this show came at a certain time where it wasn't even that popular, and now look at it. Now it's one of the greatest shows ever made. And I will say this, if I have anything I want to say is that Season 1 and Season 2 was a great start, but Season 3 and Season 4 and Season 5 are both amazing. This is ultimately a rise and fall storyline. This show is perfect. And now we're gonna get into the ending. I'm going to explain the ending of the show. So, after Jesse and Walter part ways, we see Walter go back to where he started his journey, which was in a meth lab. And then he finally dies. And after that, we see an overhead shot of his corpse lying on the floor. And to me, this was a perfect ending to Walter's character, as it shows how his obsession with meth in order to do good for his family all came at a cost to his life, and he paid the price for it in the end. And you know what? I don't want another show of Breaking Bad, because this and Better Call Saul were perfect. And in conclusion, this was a great show, and it is so much better than the shit we get nowadays. Because, you know what? This is what Hollywood has lost. They have forgotten how to make good content. And they are going to keep releasing slop no one asked for. And if I have anything I want to say is, don't waste your time. Also, anyway, that's all I got for today. Go away now, and always remember, strike back like a weapon against wokeness.